everybody. This is the first ever Pro Wrestling Musings podcast. I am Griff from GA. Joining me is Anthony. We have a whole lot to talk about, and obviously, the most pressing matter at hand is AEW Revolution. Now, we're going to talk kind of about two things here, because obviously we're going to talk about the show itself and all of the things there are to talk about with it, but also because we are Pro Wrestling Musings, we have all of our stats put together by, of course, the Lord of all that is numbers, Craig from Pro Wrestling Musings. So we're going to be referencing that, and if you want to follow along with us, then head on over to ProWrestlingMusings.com. You can see all of the stats for all of the matches that we are going to talk about. So obviously, big story is AEW Revolution, so we'll start by talking about that, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Anthony, but I want to tell a quick story first that I think will it'll contextualize what we're talking about and really the way that I feel about the whole show, and we'll see if you agree. So I, as a child, did not watch wrestling. I didn't start watching wrestling until I was about 23 years old. So I do not have the experience of, watching with my family or any of that kind of stuff. So when I was watching Revolution, I was actually hanging out with my dad, and my dad has never watched wrestling before in his life. I turn on Revolution, and he starts watching with me. And we start having such a great time watching this show together. And he's watching Ray Phoenix, and he's popping with me as Phoenix is doing all the incredible stuff he does. And he's loving the women's match, which I'm sure we'll talk about. It was one of the best matches on the show. And we are enjoying this thing so much. And then we get to the main event, and we're watching the exploding barbed wire deathmatch. And it's nothing like he's ever seen. And we are loving it. We're loving it. And we're hanging on to every single thing that happens. And it's this amazing thing that's going on. And then we get to the finish of the exploding barbed wire death match. And all of that stuff just went away. Because we're watching the finish and he's like, what the hell is going on? And then you get to the explosion that doesn't happen. And he's like, that's pretty lame. And so I have this whole 3-hour show of enjoying myself more than I probably ever have watching professional wrestling. And then you get to the end, and I've forgotten how much I've enjoyed the whole show. And to me, that is kind of Revolution in a nutshell.
Look, I definitely have to agree with that one. I was actually watching it with my son, who's 8. He loves watching wrestling with me, and it's kind of our little thing, because when I was growing up, I had a similar experience where I didn't really watch it with anyone. Mm-hmm. But ever since sort of having a kid, he's sort of enjoys wrestling and watching it with me, and we talk about his favorite wrestlers, my favorite wrestlers, and he loves it. So he was sitting there watching it with me, and yeah, he loved the barbed wire deathmatch,
mm-hmm.
and so did I. I've actually never seen a barbed wire deathmatch before, so this was my first time. Yeah. When I saw it, I had a few people say, "Hey, if you want to know what to expect, go watch this." But mm-hmm. I didn't want to. I wanted to go in and see what it is, see what it's about. I have gone and watched those other matches now, mm-hmm. And they're very different to what AEW did. But I wanted my first experience to be okay. I'm going in as someone who's never seen this before.
Yeah.
And I loved it. It was so great. Me and my son were both popping in, and when it got to the end, I was let down. My son, who, however, loved it. He
really?
thought it was great. He thought it was great because, he's a child. So any sort of explosion, no matter how big or small, he's going to love it. So at least he was happy with it. But it wasn't until, I guess, after sleeping on it, or at least, spending a few hours on it, and just thinking about it and going, you know what? I can just put that out of my head.
Yeah.
I trust AEW enough to retcon it or rectify it,
mm-hmm.
and just focus on the actual match that we had, which was an amazing match and an amazing experience.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you bring that perspective, and especially talking about your son. That is fantastic to hear. And ultimately, when I slept on it, I had the exact same feeling. It's really unfortunate that was the ending, that's what people are going to remember. And, everyone talks about, it's that last moment, and it's the difference. Like when you compare it to WWE will put on a show that isn't that good up until that final moment, and that final moment is great. And so that's what you remember. And AEW has in essence, done the reverse. They put on a tremendous show all the way up until that last moment, and that last moment was a letdown, but it's just one moment. And ultimately, I agree with you. The match itself, the barbed wire death match, was amazing. I watched a few from Japan, from FMW and stuff, going into it, so I had seen it before. And when we're watching this match, it's like they've added ring psychology into a death match. Like, you don't watch CZW, you don't watch old ECW or FMW for ring psychology, and yet here are Kenny Omega and Jon Moxley, and they're putting together a match between what would make sense, two characters who are crazy and not all there, but also who are incredibly smart and really understand the gravity of what they're doing at the time. And I think when you look at the statistics, which again, you can follow along with us at ProWrestlingMusings.com, look at the statistics from this match, and you'll see it's exactly what you would expect from a match like this. You have the heel Kenny Omega, who is throwing more strikes, but you have Jon Moxley. When you look at the strike downs, that is the number of times that a guy knocks his opponent down with a strike. Moxley's landing more of those, so he's hitting harder than Omega. They're grappling some. Omega's locking him in submission holds and rest holds like that. To me, this was a great match. I don't know if you care about star ratings at all. I have them in my notes just for my own personal reference. I gave this one 4.5 stars. It was a 5-star match with a finish that dragged it down, but it was an amazing match overall, and everyone should go watch it, finish or not. This is what a modern day death match looks like for me.
Yeah, look, for myself, if I forget the ending, which I can do, I think it is definitely a really solid match, and I really did enjoy it. I'd probably be saying it's probably about 4.5 for me.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, for me, a couple little tiny things where the explosions just seem to go off just slightly before the wrestlers hit, but there was enough there that it was like, okay, look, it's wrestling. You got to suspend a little bit of disbelief for this stuff. They're not actually wanting to explode the people, although that would be certainly a very interesting thing to watch. But yeah, look, I think the fact that we had a death match on AEW on a show this big
mm-hmm.
is crazy. And I, as a fan, I lost faith in wrestling a while back.
Mm-hmm.
I've only recently come back into it in the last year, 3 years maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And I never thought I'd see this sort of a match on a big network. And here we are, talking about it. And yeah, look, you mentioned the stats. I'm looking at them now, and just looking at the pin attempts. Kenny's 6 pin attempts versus John's Moxley's 2.
Mm-hmm.
The 5 dirty attacks versus the 2. Really interesting that they're even for weapon attacks. And I guess when you look at the rivalry between them both, it is they use a lot of weapons both. So
mm-hmm.
I'm really glad that that's exactly the same at 12 apiece, because
yep.
they both use them quite a lot. So yeah, it's really interesting to get down to the nitty-gritty and look at what actually happened in the strike rate. And then if you go down and look at the offensive graph,
mm-hmm.
Just below the main, you can see...
Yep. That's what I was going to bring up next, so thank you.
Omega was on top for that first part, but then Moxley sort of come back, and he spent a good half the match on top, but
mm-hmm.
he wasn't as aggressive or explosive as Kenny, and I think that's where Kenny ended up, I guess, coming on top.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And when you look at this graph, really when you look at the stats in general, if you took the exploding barbed wire deathmatch thing, if you just took that out and this was just AEW World Championship, you would look at this and you would say, well, they had a slow but effective psychological match. That's exactly what this would look like. This would look like heel versus babyface. The heel is on top. The babyface makes his comeback, and the heel wins right at the end. That's exactly what this would look like. And to me, integrating that with just the insanity of exploding barbed wire is it's amazing that they did it. And like you said, when you look at this the offense totals, when we look at this line chart, what you're seeing is Moxley starts out hot, the babyface starts out hot, the heel gains control, and then right around that kind of 10-minute mark, I think, I don't know this for sure, but what I would bet is that right there, about 10 minutes in, is when Moxley hit that Death Rider through the barbed wire boards on the outside. So Moxley hits this incredible move that makes you go nuts, and he's the babyface, so you're supposed to cheer him because he did this incredible thing, and he's on top from that point on until right in the 20-minute-ish mark, 17, 20 minutes. That's when the Good Brothers get involved. Omega comes out using their help, and Omega wins the match. And this is what I want to talk about when it comes to the finish. How do you feel about the Good Brothers being involved so much like they were in the finish of that match?
Yeah, look, it's really hard because they have been involved in pretty much everything that Kenny's been doing, so it makes sense on that aspect, and it makes sense that the story I feel that they're telling is that Kenny cannot beat Moxley without help. The first match that they had, obviously, where Kenny beat him, he had the microphone and Don Callis, obviously. This match, he's had the Good Brothers and that to help him. So I guess for the story that he can't beat him, and I think commentary put this over really well, and I got to say the commentary during this match was so well done.
I agree.
But they said that, Kenny cannot beat Moxley without help, and having them there made a lot of sense story-wise. Me personally, I would have liked to see them not there and see Kenny do it himself, but that said, obviously, he'll be heel. Heel will get help. There's no rules. It is a death match. They're there to bury Moxley and send him off. It makes sense story-wise. Personally, I wasn't a huge fan of it, but it makes sense. And when you're watching wrestling, you'd like it to make sense. And to me, it did make sense, and that's why I can give it a pass.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. My issue with it was actually an issue with my own assumption of what's going to happen. My assumption here was that this match was a way to write Jon Moxley off TV for an extended period of time because he has his first child on the way, and he's put so much effort and work and blood into doing what he does, and so I figured they're going to use this to get him out of here. Omega's going to get some new challengers, and Moxley's going to be gone for a long time. So that's my assumption. But if they actually are planning one more match between Moxley and Omega, then this finish would make a lot of sense, because then it would be exactly what you're saying, that the heel can't beat the babyface without help. And so we get into a situation like a steel cage match or something more extreme where the heel cannot get help. And that's going to be the blow-off to the feud. So if you told me that we're going to get one more match between Moxley and Omega, then I would have absolutely no issue with doing it this way. However, if it means that Moxley is done, if he is being written off, and this is the end of the Moxley-Omega feud, then I don't, like you said, it makes sense for the heel to get help, but for the overall story, the fact that in real life and in kayfabe, Kenny Omega's goal is to be considered the greatest wrestler of all time, and he needs help to do it. Like, it's kind of like he shouldn't have accepted that help. If he's so concerned with being considered the greatest of all time, he shouldn't have accepted the help from the Good Brothers. He should have told them to go away so that he can beat Moxley himself, so that he's the one who can be considered the greatest of all time. And that's actually what my dad said when we're watching it. And remember, my dad has never watched professional wrestling before, but he's picked up on the story that Don Callis keeps talking about, which is that Omega wants to be considered the GOAT. And he's saying, well, how are you going to be considered the greatest of all time if you need help? And to me, if this is the end of the story, then it is that disconnect doesn't quite do it for me. I don't know if I'm being too nitpicky here, but that's where I fall on it.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying, and in aspects I do agree, but in also other aspects where he said that holding the championship made him the greatest. So he's putting over the championship, saying that, this belt makes me the greatest. So if he's holding it, therefore he is the greatest. But I guess
Okay. Okay.
that's something that you only really get if you're watching the product every week, and you're watching everything. They didn't really put that over in this match, so
Yeah.
that's just a little something. But for me, I was under the same assumption that, and I think a lot of people were, that this was going to be Moxley's send off because he's going to go spend time, being a dad. And
Right.
I think that everyone's favorite joke is that Moxley's doing all the crazy stuff before he becomes dad.
Yeah,
I think he's
exactly.
signed up to like Bloodsport or something coming up as well. So he's getting all that craziness out before he becomes a dad. So I think a lot of people were expecting him to ride off. For me, I don't necessarily need to see another Moxley versus Omega match right
Yep.
now,
Yep.
because for me, what else can you do? They just had an exploding barbed wire death
Yes,
match.
exactly.
The
Exactly.
there's nothing really higher. The only other thing I could think of that would meet that, if they are going to do one more match right now, it would be a Buried Alive match. That would be the only thing that I could
Oh,
see them really doing.
interesting.
And Omega literally burying Moxley alive. But I don't particularly need that right now. I think
Yeah.
leaving this as it is, and then having Moxley take that time off, and then he can come back and go straight into the title match. The title feud
Yeah.
again if they need that. Or he can go do something else. It just leaves a lot more options, and
Yeah.
I don't need to see the same match 4 or 5 times. We've seen them fight enough recently, especially you've had the doubles, you've had a trio match, you've now had them one-on-one twice.
Yeah.
I've got my fix of this feud. I think we need Omega to go and have other challenges now,
Yes.
and let Moxley go and do something else for a little while, because you don't want to overdo it.
Yes, I absolutely agree. If you believe the speculation, then it's possible that coming into the summer, Kenny Omega will actually be challenging for the Impact World title. That's been talked about for a few months now. So Omega with Swan, I think that would be cool. There are probably a dozen guys in AEW that I would love to see paired with Kenny Omega right now. But I'm with you. I mean, I have more of a stomach for this kind of deathmatch wrestling than I think probably your average wrestling viewer does outside of the CZW fan base and that. But for those of us who watch Dynamite Weekly, I think I have more of a stomach for the deathmatch than most. But even for me, I'm saying I don't need to see some super mega gory deathmatch that Moxley, loses and he's like taken to within an inch of his life or something like that. I don't need to see that right now. I think you can put Moxley on the shelf, like you said, give Omega some new challengers, let Omega show why he is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, because in my opinion, he is. Let him show that in your traditional wrestling matches, and then, we can have Moxley come back later down the road, and then we can do the final blow-off for like a 2-3 year story, something like that. And maybe that's the plan. A lot of people say you can't do super long-term stories now like you used to. You think about like the Taz Sabu storyline in ECW. You think about Sting versus the NWO. And people say you can't do that anymore. Maybe the goal for AEW overall is to say, you know what, we're going to do it. We're going to give you an 18-month storyline like you used to get in the 90s. So I don't want to speculate, and I'm going to go right back to what you said at the beginning to kind of put a nice little bow on a long conversation about the main event, and to say I trust AEW to know what they're doing. They can roll with the punches, they can roll with the pyro botch, and they can deliver us still a great story, and it should not overshadow the fact that what we saw was a brilliant match that you should go watch if you haven't seen it, even if you've only seen the finish. The 25-minute match before that is excellent. Now, I want to go from that to a very traditional match from two guys who, for me, are the best old school heels in the world right now. And I am, of course, talking about MJF and Jericho versus the Young Bucks for the AEW World Tag Team Championships. What did you think about this match?
Okay, so I have some thoughts about this one. The main thing I have is that, to be honest, I was not into this match at all. 100%.
Okay.
I could not care about it. I was not into it. I had no interest in watching it at all. So I was coming into this match with that sort of a mindset of just I don't care.
Okay.
However, I think it was actually something that uh, Sir Samuel actually wrote on the AEW Revolution preview.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Which
that
you
was
can also check
also
out
on
on
the website. Oh,
ProWrestlingMusings.com.
yeah.
Sorry, I had.
So that's no, all good. I was
We're on
about
the
to say,
same page here.
yeah, we are. So look, when I read that, it kind of turned things a little bit around for me.
Okay.
With this match, and it actually helped me sort of, I guess, get into it a little bit more. I did not want to see Bucks lose the title to Jericho and MJF because I think that was just a solid good heel work of them, not wanting to. But I just think that the story of they've attacked the dad, they've made it personal. It just didn't really do much for me, the story-wise.
Yeah.
The match, however, was much better than I thought it was going to be. So I think that's where we really look at it. But in terms of the stats, they are extremely surprising how they are. Like when we look at the strikes, there was only 28 strikes for MJF and Jericho versus 116 from Young Bucks. I would have sworn that Jericho and MJF had a lot more. So
Yeah.
I think it didn't seem as one sided as the stats I think make it out. I will say that at the start of the match when the Young Bucks were really fired up and it was getting in nice and fired up, it was it was a really good match. I liked that.
Yep.
It sort of did teeter a little bit there where it sort of slowed down, but then when Jericho and MJF started countering things and starting to do their offense and that, I found myself sucked back into it. So
Yeah.
I think it did a really good job of doing the match and getting the match done. It wasn't obviously the Bucks or Jericho and MJF's greatest match, but it was a good match, which, I would say it was a pay-per-view level match.
Yep.
I think it had the quality of being a pay-per-view match. So yeah, I went into it not really wanting to watch it, but I left glad that I did because it was good enough to hold its own.
Yep. I agree. I think if you are someone who has ever read the AEW Power Rankings on ProWrestlingMusings.com, which I write, I am a huge fan of MJF. I think this guy is going to be the biggest star in the world sooner rather than later. And I think the only issue with this match was that it was worked like your basic heel versus face tag team match, and both teams made it work well, but the Young Bucks got too much here for me. What you're supposed to see, and if you go down and look at our minute by minute offense line chart, then you can see that the Bucks started out hot, which was great, and I agree with you. I think it makes a lot of sense for that feud, considering that they came out there and they just started throwing hands and they locked him in the stereo sharpshooters. I think that was great. But at the time when the Inner Circle was supposed to have the cutoff, it didn't really happen. It became an even match, and then the Bucks took control again and won. And for me, what I would want to see is the first 5 minutes, the Bucks are going nuts. The heels get the cutoff with Wardlow's help, and then for about 5 to 7 minutes, depending on how long you want the match to go, that's where the Inner Circle takes complete control. That their line should shoot way up, and they should get like 75% of the offense, and then we even out, and that's where the Bucks get their finish. So for me, the only issue was they didn't work it old school enough. But that being said, it was a really fun match. It's not as great as Bucks versus Omega and Page, which is maybe my favorite match of all time. It wasn't as good as Bucks versus FTR, but it was still good. Matt Jackson kicking out of the Floyd shot into the Heat Seeker, that was nuts. I thought that was the finish. And so Matt kicking out of that was awesome. And the Heat Seeker is not a protected move. So I was hanging on that. That was great. What I loved specifically was that they kept doing these kind of interference flash pinfalls, which normally you would expect to be the finish of the match, and they never were. They kept getting kicked out of. You kind of walk the line if you're going to do that, where you kind of get people biting too much, and so by the end, they don't really care. But this match was structured in such a way that each one of those near falls, I was with it because I was like, this is the finish of the match. And they keep kicking out, and I was hanging on with them every second. They did it really, really well. So what comes out of it to me is the Inner Circle War Council thing that they're doing on Dynamite is going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait to see that. And I don't want to hear anyone say that the Young Bucks cannot put together a psychological match, that they're just spot monkeys, because this was a psychological match and they really made it work. It was some great storytelling from both teams. And ultimately, I enjoyed it. I gave it 3.5 stars for whatever that's worth. It was a fun match.
I'd probably give it 3. Like I said, I felt very similar. I enjoyed it, but I didn't overly enjoy it. Definitely nowhere near the level of match than Bucks or FTR or Bucks and Hangman Kenny. But then again, I don't think anyone expected it to be that. So I think that's where it saved it. When you look at the line graph, it is very, very weird that you don't see the heels take over. So I think that's, for me, again, just kept it in mind. I fully expect the route now to be MJF versus Jericho, with MJF to take over the Inner Circle. I think Jericho will probably go do something else for a while now, or maybe even just take a little bit of time off. I wouldn't say no to him taking some time off, to be honest. I think he deserves it. He's been, in the top contender sort of position. He's been front and center for a lot of stuff. So I think, giving him some time off, letting MJF take the Inner Circle to the next level, is what the story should be. And then maybe Jericho can come back later on. But right now, I think that's going to be for the Inner Circle's direction. For the Bucks, we have got the Bucks versus Rey Fenix and Pac, which is just, dude. I can't even imagine that sort of match. But I feel that match is going to be much more in the Bucks' wheelhouse and something that they're much more familiar with. This week on Dynamite, we've got Rey Fenix, who I personally think is pretty much one of the best wrestlers in the world right now. Versus Matt Jackson in a singles match, and I'm all in for Rey Fenix winning that. Oh my God! Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and then I'm assuming that we're going to get Nick Jackson versus Pac the week after, I'm guessing. So, we've got two solid one-on-one matches. Leading up to that tag match, and that tag match should be great considering who's in it.
Oh my God, I cannot wait for this tag match to happen. If you remember all the way back, it was one of the first episodes of Dynamite, I think. Nick Jackson took on Rey Fenix, and that was one of the best Dynamite matches up until Omega took on Rey Fenix, and now that to me is probably the best Dynamite match they ever did. And hopefully you're kind of catching a pattern here. Rey Fenix absolutely is one of the best wrestlers in the world, in my opinion, and I absolutely agree with you. For Jericho, I want him to go to commentary. I love Chris Jericho on commentary. He is so great, and he was part of that Omega Phoenix match. He's part of what made it so much fun. So if he wants to not get physically involved, but still wants to be involved with AEW, I think that's what he should be doing personally. And you've segued us beautifully into the Tag Team Royale. I don't want to spend a ton of time with this because we don't have stats for this, but I want to talk mostly about the Final Four. The Final Four of this Tag Team Battle Royale it was like a 5-star match just by itself. It was like 5 minutes, and it was some of the best wrestling that you will ever find. To me, no one does battle royals like AEW. They just have such a great sense of how to structure them, how to put them together, how to tell stories. I don't know who produces them. It might be DDP, or it might be Jerry Lynn would be my 2 guesses. Whoever does it, they need a raise, because every AEW Battle Royal is so much fun, and this Final Four was so good. It was so good, and Phoenix looks just like a superstar, and I told that my dad started to get really involved at this point because he saw Rey Fenix, and he's like, this dude is unbelievable. Jungle Boy is going to be a world champion. He's going to be a star, and he gets the rub by eliminating Pac. and then you have this final matchup that was just Rey Fenix and John Silver, and it's just so great. And this Battle Royal was so much fun. And to me, it was perfectly placed right after this kind of slower, more old school tag team match. You get to see the Young Bucks challengers, and I cannot wait. Rey Fenix and Pac versus the Young Bucks. I mean, are you kidding me? It's gonna be like a 2 trillion star match. I mean, there's not enough stars to give what that match is going to be.
Yeah, agreed. Look, that Final Four, I was edge of my seat. I had no idea who was going to win.
Yep.
So my prediction going into this was for Phoenix and Pac to win. I think that it's well and truly past due to put some belts on them guys. So definitely all in for them to beating the Bucks when they do fight, and all in for them having a run, having Death Triangle running the gauntlet of the tag team division. That's going to be a great thing to have.
Yep.
Jungle Boy was really great throughout the entire Battle Royal. You can tell. And look, this is just going in over the last couple of weeks. His matches against FTR, his one-on-one match, which was really, really good. He has turned around a new leaf, and he is being protected. He's being given a lot, and he is showing that he is capable of hanging. And you spoke about the future of AEW. If we remember MJF versus Jungle Boy, everyone was saying at the time of that match that these two are going to be fighting in this division as the top heel and top face in a few years' time as champion and challenger.
Yep.
I 100% am on board for that. And Jungle Boy will be there, and he is developing so fast, it's kind of scary. Out of that four, I want a John Silver versus Pac match. Seeing them two face to face, I want that so much. I just inject that into my veins right now. And yeah, that last sequence between Pac and Jungle Boy, hell, give me a one-on-one match between them two. Yep. I wouldn't mind seeing. I think what they might have, we might see Santana and Ortiz versus Jurassic Express, because Jungle Boy did eliminate both of them.
Yep.
So I think that we might see that happening. We're going to see something happening with QT and what's his name? Sorry.
Dustin Rhodes.
Yep. Dustin Rhodes. Yeah, I'm guessing that there's going to be something there, and I'm in for them. Both of them two guys have amazing depth of knowledge and wrestling ability. So I'm in for a one-on-one on that one. And I think during the media call, they had Paul White, aka Big Show, come out, and he said that he watched that match and it was one of his favorite matches because every tag team had their little chance to shine and put over what they're all about. And I think that is true. I think everyone had a bit of a shine. Everyone had a chance. Everyone had a moment, and that's what you want. You want everyone to come out leaving that match looking better than they went in.
Yes,
and I think they achieved that.
Yes, that's a brilliant way to put it, and that's exactly what AEW did here. I think real quickly, the team that stood out most to me in terms of their stock rising in my mind was Bear Country, because I knew a little bit about them. I had watched them a couple times on Dark, and they were fun, but man, they came out here and they just looked like powerhouses. They looked somehow stronger than everyone else. They looked stronger than like Luchasaurus. They looked stronger than the Butcher. Like, those guys, to me, their stock really rose in this match by the way they came out. And like you said, that's exactly what you want to see from a match like this.
Yeah, and it looks like because of the dark build and everything, we're going to get Bear Country versus Butcher and Blade, and I am very much in that. I'm hoping that because they've involved some tables a lot during the match, like the first time they had the big interaction, one of them went through the table. They've involved tables and weapons and that. So, you know what? Sign me up for a tables match between them two to get for this feud. I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do. And I saw on Twitter during the match, I can't remember who said it. I think it might have been Sean Ross Sapp said this is kind of like Bear Country's coming out party. And I agree. It was a really great showing for them.
Yes, absolutely. Let's get to our next match on the stats right now, and again, follow along with us, ProWrestlingMusings.com. This match stole the show for me and was the match of everything that I did not expect to be as good as it was. This is the women's world title match between Hikaru Shida and Ryumi Tsunami. And here on Pro Wrestling Musings, we have a lot of people that are really into Joshi wrestling. And so you can look on this website, and we have stuff about Stardom, we have Tokyo Joshi Pro, lots of guys that will talk about Joshi wrestling. And I do not know much about Joshi wrestling myself. I watched the tournament, and I thought there's some wrestlers here that are really good, that I like. Maki Ito stood out to me, and she's in the U.S. now, so I'm very glad to see her. But, I'm watching Ryumi Tsunami, and I'm like, I kind of remember her from early on in AEW's tenure, but not that much. And, she's kind of your generic big wrestler. She's strong, strike-based, all that kind of stuff. Like, I wasn't really into it. And I'm not really that into Shida as champion. But my God, this match blew me away. I mean, this was so much fun, and it was so well structured. And if you look at our chart, our minute-by-minute offensive chart, this is exactly what you want to see from a match like this. Ryumi Tsunami has all of the offense early on. It starts to go down as the match goes on, as Shida gets into it, and then finally they cross right at that 10-minute mark. Finally, Shida gets the advantage, and then for the next 5 minutes, Shida is all over Ryo. Ryo kicks out of everything. Shida hits her with everything she's got, and Ryo keeps kicking out, and finally Shida hits her with that corkscrew knee strike, which I've never seen her do before in AEW, and it put her away. This match was fun. It was exactly your hard-hitting heel versus face match. Mizunami got most of the offense. She was throwing a ton of strikes. Shida was answering with some more grapples, some more speed-based offense. This was awesome. This match was so good. What did you think about it?
I enjoyed it at the I think about halfway point when Cheetah hit Ryo on the outside of the ring on the steps. Mm-hmm. From that moment onwards, I enjoyed it. The sort of early build, I wasn't much of a fan of. I just couldn't really get into it, but after that moment, I noticed that they started hitting a bit harder. They started going harder. It's kind of like both of them just said, you know what, let's do this. And then, because that's what I was expecting from the start. A lot of people were saying, okay, hey, look, this is going to be kind of like a Japanese Joshi wrestling match where the ladies are just going to, beat the crap out of each other. And when that didn't start, and look, that could have been my own expectations coming into it. But, when it started off kind of slow, I was a little bit let down. But when it's put on that accelerator, it put on the accelerator, and I was all in for it. Looking at the minute by minute graph again, nothing surprising. They just quality work from both of them. Yep. I'm very interested to see what's going to happen now, and if Ryo's going to stay around for a while. I know that they've got the 6-person tag this week on Dynamite with Brit Baker, Maki Ito, and Nyla Rose versus Shida, Ryo, and Thunder Rosa. Mm-hmm. I do not know who to pick for the winner for that one. You've got Brit Baker, who, all intents and purposes, should be the next champion. She 100% should be.
Absolutely.
I think everyone was surprised that she didn't win the tournament, but
myself included.
Yeah, same. But I think they just obviously decided to give a bit of shine to someone else who might be coming into the company a bit more permanently. So I hope that that's what they're doing. Maki Ito obviously just come, and looking at the live reactions from her pop and the online reactions, she is already massive. So seeing her and Nyla Rose, she was pretty heavily featured and heavily protected during the tournament. She had a lot of great showings, and has always been a very strongly protected wrestler. Then they're coming up against, obviously, the champion, Ryo, who's obviously just lost the championship, and Thunder Rosa, who arguably is one of the best women's wrestlers in the world at the moment, and is just doing amazing stuff. So I can't call who's going to win this one. I'm hoping it's going to be an amazing match. Now that we've finished the tournament and we've finished everything here, I think that, and I hope that this means that we're going to get some more time for the women's wrestling, because obviously that's been a very big criticism of AEW. Right. The fact that we got this for 15 minutes, was a good sign that they gave him at least just over 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at the tag team champion match, that got 17 minutes. So you were only a couple minutes short. So that's a good sign. So Tony Khan on the media call also said that in a few weeks' time you're going to have the women main eventing. So I'm hoping that they can really start to keep up what they've been doing. This tournament has been great. Seeing the women get the time to wrestle, get this spotlight has been fantastic, and I think a lot of people have enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. So I just hope that it continues.
Yep. I absolutely agree with you. When you look at it in terms of the other singles matches, it was the big money match got less time. The big money match got just under 15 minutes, and the women's title got just over 15 minutes. You had the Orange Cassidy and Chuck Taylor versus Miro and Kip Sabian match. That one got under 8 minutes. So you can see that they gave the women time here, and they really got rewarded. As far as a complete package goes, from the match all the way through the finish, this was the best complete product on the show for me. I think the Tag Team Battle Royal had a better finish. That Final Four was better. The Exploding Barbed Wire Deathmatch was a better match overall, but the finish wasn't good. This as a complete product was as good as anything that there was on the show for me. And I think ironically, it means that now is the time that you take the belt off of Shida, right? I mean, normally you would think, okay, your champion's just put in a hell of a shift on this show, so now she's got some momentum. So for me, what that means is get the belt off of her while people are going to be watching. Her reign had really cooled down and really lost me. I was all in when she beat Nyla Rose for the belt almost a year ago now. I was all in for it, and I really cooled off. But now this whole thing is hot. That schmaz at the end, and now the six-man tag that you talked about, those are 6 wrestlers. All of them could be believable world champions. So it is not for lack of depth that this women's division has not really gotten to the heights that we expect. It's just for lack of time and lack of coherent booking within the women's division. Well, now that can change. For me, and I think you would agree, give Brit Baker the title now, or at least when it would make sense that on your next big event. Give Brit the title. That is the best character in the women's division right now. Let her be the champion and do her whole role model gimmick with the belt. And then you just have a line of challengers that you can build up. I mean, you can put Rose against her. Obviously, Thunder Rosa makes a lot of sense, and I agree with you. She's one of the best female wrestlers in the world. You can put Maki Ito against her because Ito is really over. You can give Shida a rematch. You can build up Tai Conti, who's one of my favorites in the women's division. Red Velvet looked great in the tag match at Crossroads. Jade Cargill looked great in that match. When Anna Jay comes back, you see how much people were really into her. She was over right before she got injured. So give her time. Like, there's a lot of women you could do a lot of stuff with here. And to me, this can be the kickoff for really booking that women's division strong. This tournament didn't look like it was going to be as big as it was. This match didn't look like it was going to be as fun as it was, and it all was. This is the time for AEW to really start with this women's division and really start building it up, I think.
Definitely great. Look, there's no more excuses now. When we look at the Brody Lee tribute match, and I said this at the time, we had Anna Jay and Ty Conte versus Brit Baker and Penelope Ford, who's someone who's missing from that whole conversation but should definitely be involved. Yep. And we had them in a four-way tag match, and that was one of my favorite matches of the show. And I said at the time, you could legitimately build this division around those 4 women, and it'd be great. But now we've got all these women here. We got 6 women this week, and I just think the time for excuses is over. If they don't do something now, if they go back to not having them featured, if they go back to not having storylines, it's just unacceptable at this point. So look, I'm really looking forward to it. There's a lot of fire in the division right now. I agree, it is time for Baker to do it, and you know what, I think they're going to do it during a Dynamite episode because, like I said, Tony Khan said that they were going to have women main event a Dynamite. Let the main event, the title match, Cheetah versus Brit Baker in a few weeks' time. Have Brit Baker beat her on an episode of Dynamite. We don't really see the title change hands at on an episode of Dynamite,
Yeah.
great time for it. Great time for it. And then have Brit Baker's first defense at Double or Nothing, because I don't want to see Shida and that. I don't want to see it dragged out that long. I want to see it sooner rather than later, the change.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the last title change on Dynamite was probably when Brody Lee beat Cody Rhodes for the TNT title, if I'm not mistaken.
Did Darby beat Cody for on TNT when he won the TNT, or was that on a pay-per-view? I can't quite remember.
I want to say that was at Beach Break, so it was on TNT but not Dynamite.
Yeah. So
I guess we're splitting hairs a little bit there, but yeah.
That's okay. Look, it's one of those things that you just don't really see, and I think, one of the drives of what makes me want to watch a weekly show is anything could happen.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And that's when you look at the old philosophy of booking like the ECW Television Championship, or WCW used to do this with their US title. The whole point was this thing's going to be on TV a lot and it could change hands at any point. So you got to watch the product because you might see a title change at any point. And I think in modern wrestling, we've kind of gotten away from that. So I agree with you. Give us a world title change on Dynamite and remind us that, look, even on these weekly shows, big, huge things can still happen on these things. So I agree with you. Put the belt on Baker on Dynamite and then have her first defense at Double or Nothing, maybe against Cheetah, maybe against Thunder Rosa. It could be whoever, but this is a high point right now for the women's division, and I'm really excited about where it could go. I wanna skip through the next three. I want to skip through Sabian and Miro versus Chuck Taylor and Orange Cassidy. I think that was fine. Miro looked good. Keep booking him like a monster.
I'll just mention one thing.
Please.
In regards to this, so for this, for the story going in, obviously it was a bit all over the place, but the main thing I want to say is that this should not have lasted 7 minutes and 53 seconds. This should have just been after the beatdown that they had. Miro should have just brought them in and 2-3 hits maybe, and then pinned him. Bam, done. That's what it should have been. I know, obviously, they wanted to give them all a little bit of time, but for the beatdown that you got, 7 minutes and 53 seconds is too long. Yes, it was very. I agree. And when you look at it, it's very one-sided strikes, 45 versus 5. It's just that to me is just showing that it was just far too long. And their match offense is at 50% each. Considering that there was that big down at the background, it's far too much. Yes, Miro looks strong, but he needs to look dominant, especially if they are going to build him for a title match anytime soon. I don't think that this is over. I think that we might get a Miro versus Cassidy one-on-one match, but I think, I'm hoping that they all move on to other things right now, but we'll see, I guess, what happens. But it was a bit of a disappointing thing that it went on just far too long.
Yeah.
And in regards to the Matt Hardy and Hangman Page, I thought it was Matt Hardy's best match on AEW. A lot of really good veteran moves where he was targeting that hand, and something that I think, is missing a lot, and I'd like to see that where they really target that offense. Yeah. But it was never any doubt that Hangman was getting the win because, he's on a roll and he's being built up for bigger and better things.
Yeah. I think when it comes to that big money match, I will also say one quick thing. I agree with everything you said, by the way, about Sabian and Miro versus Chuck and Cassidy. So nothing more needs to be said. For the big money match, Hangman does not connect with me the same way that he does for a lot of people. Now, I thought Hangman should have been the first world champion. At the time. I thought he should have beaten Jericho. Now, obviously, Jericho's run proved me wrong. Jericho was a great world champion. But at the time, I was all in on Hangman Page, and he's kind of lost me since then. I still like him, but it's kind of like his story doesn't really connect with me anymore. And maybe it's because I don't see enough of myself in him. Before he was the plucky babyface, and I personally could see a lot of myself. But, he started, he drinks all the time, and I don't drink personally, so I can't really relate to that. And he's kind of being aloof, and he didn't want to join the Dark Order, but it's like the Dark Order are babyfaces. We all love the Dark Order, so you don't want to join it, but we all want you to join it. Like it's not really connecting with me. And this match, because of the stipulation didn't connect with me, because in kayfabe you're saying, oh, you're going to take my first quarter earnings from 2021, but number one, that's kind of a dumb stipulation because wrestlers make a lot of money. So losing a quarter of your earnings it's not like going to put you out on the street. And number two, it's hard for me to suspend my disbelief with that particular stipulation. I don't know why, but I could not suspend my disbelief. So all I'm watching this match and going, I don't care. Like, these guys are going to get paid anyway. Like, it's not fair. So I rated this match lower than I think most people would. I think it was a fine pay-per-view match. The outcome was clear. Hangman was always going to win, but it was a good showing for him. And I do agree with you. From a pure technical wrestling standpoint, this was Matt Hardy's best match. And it really showed why he's such a credit to the AEW roster. Dude's a veteran. He's been around a long, long time. And he can put over young up-and-comers like this, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, totally agree. To be honest, both of these two matches didn't need to be on here. They could have both been on Dynamite. And would have been perfectly fine on Dynamite. They're not. They are not pay-per-view level matches. And a lot of the feedback from Twitter during the matches and that, because I was live, I was watching and commenting on with a lot of other people on Twitter at the time, and a lot of people felt the exact same, that look, this is fine, but this could have been on Dynamite, and they could have had something else. But for Hardy, I've enjoyed this character, the veteran Carney version of him. I have really enjoyed it. So for me, it did make sense for the money, because money is such a big thing to his character. But again, that comes across as you have to know what his character is going into it for that. Hangman, I'm actually the opposite to you. I actually didn't like him at the start, but I kind of like him now, because I see that. Yeah, because now that he's sort of gone down the well, I'm all in for, I guess, the redemption story arc. That's what I'm hoping that they do. That he's hit the bottom and now he's going to build himself up. So that's what I hope, but we'll see what happens there.
Well, that's great. That's what wrestling is all about. We have these two completely different ways of looking at this thing, and we get two totally different outcomes from watching this match. I think that's exactly what wrestling is all about.
100% agree. So yeah, look, the matches, I think, were spent longer than we wanted to, but look, they were fine matches. They weren't pay-per-view level matches, but they were okay. The structure of the pay-per-view in total, I was all fine for them starting off with the tag match, because it started off hot.
Yeah.
But maybe not having these two back to back would have been a better option, because it killed the middle of the pay-per-view.
Yeah, I agree. And then following it up with the ladder match, which I thought the right man won at the end, but God, it was so long, this ladder match. It was way too long for what they were trying to do. That was my one thought with it. Ethan Page is cool, the match, the spots were fun, but God, it was so long. It was like excruciatingly long.
I actually should have seen it coming, because Scorpio Sky just launched his new AEW backed podcast, so I should have seen him winning coming. I thought that the TBA would have won, because the last time we got a TBA, it was Brian Cage, and he went on to win. So I was sort of on that. Okay, look, whenever they've had an unknown, because when we had that TBA for the first one, it was Hangman Page. So the TBA more often than not comes in to win. So I thought, but now that I think about it, he's just launched a podcast. He's kind of gone a bit more heelish, so a bit of a character change. He's just come back. There was a lot leaning towards his victory, which I should have seen coming, but I didn't. And that's, I guess, one of the best things of pro wrestling, that when you don't know what the result is, it does add into it. But I agree, it definitely did feel very long in some parts. There was some really good spots in it, as always. My favorite type of match is a ladder match. I love me a good ladder match. But look, it was definitely not the best ladder match. there was parts in there where they're just seemingly doing nothing. So I didn't feel that there was a desperate scramble for the belt at any stage. I didn't feel like I felt that there was a little bit less intensity than I'd like to see in a ladder match. So yeah, for overall, the ladder match, I'd probably only give a 3, to be honest.
I gave it the exact same.
Yeah, look, maybe even 2.5. I was kind of a bit let down considering the talent that was in that ring. It was kind of a little bit of a letdown.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I hate to make this transition, but speaking of letdown, the next thing that happened was Christian Cage was revealed as the big signing, and I don't want to classify it as a letdown. Here's the thing for me about Christian. I told myself I wasn't going to do this, and I did it. As soon as they announced the big signing, in my mind, I'm like, it's Brock Lesnar. And I knew it wasn't Brock Lesnar. But I'm thinking, look, Brock Lesnar is my favorite wrestler. I knew him from before I even started watching wrestling. So to kind of see his whole journey, I love what he's about. I hate the way he's booked at times in WWE, but him as a wrestler, as a person, he is my absolute favorite, with Kenny Omega being a close second. So I'm like, it's not Brock Lesnar, but it might be Brock Lesnar. And so I told myself from the beginning, I'm not going to let myself be disappointed when this isn't Brock Lesnar. And then it wasn't Brock Lesnar, and I'm like, oh, it's not Brock Lesnar. And it's so unfair because Christian is really good. And the more I think about it, if he's going with that outwork everyone gimmick, which, by the way, that is a sick shirt. I bought one off of AEW shop. It's an awesome design. If he's going to go with that gimmick, it could work. It could really work. So my mind is open for Christian and what he's going to do here. The only thing I will say is, to me, they kind of got the worst of both worlds with the signing. Not to say that Christian is not great, but to me, you either could have gone with an absolute icon that like everyone would know, wrestling fan or not, and it would draw so many eyes to the product, and they could have, all these kind of different roles. And so I was thinking, like, it could be Angle, because he's a great character, he's a great talker, so he could be like, a manager, or he could be like a commissioner or something like that. Or it could be someone like Brock Lesnar, who everyone would know, and he just has to fight one match, put a guy over, and you would consider it a great run in the company. So it could either be that, or it could be, I was thinking possibly someone like Okada, for example, like a wrestler in his prime who could come in right now and be a world championship threat immediately and be a top guy for a long time. So I was thinking it could be either one of those two, and Christian is not really either one of those. He's a great wrestler, but he doesn't have that many years left, and he's really well known in wrestling, but he's not like a icon. He's not like a superstar. So my mind is open about Christian Cage being the guy. I'm excited to see what they do with him.
Well, I guess good news is that AEW have advertised that he's going to be speaking about why he joined AEW this week on AEW. So, that's going to be some good news. So we're going to hear him talk. I grew up watching Edge and Christian as a tag team. My all-time favorite match is them versus Hardy Boys versus Dudley Boys in the TLC match. That's my all-time favorite match. I don't even care what happens now. That will never be replaced. So yeah, look, for me to see Christian come in was good. But and I think this is what a lot of us all done is, when they did the announcement, we all worked ourselves so much. I saw so many people saying, it's definitely CM Punk. It's definitely CM Punk.
Right.
My biggest issue here is that it shouldn't have been a guy. They don't need any other guys. They have got a massive, massive roster of men at the moment, and a lot of them aren't getting a lot of time that they deserve. If they were to put in a Hall of Fame worthy female wrestler who could help, really, really push this new direction of the division and their commitment to female wrestling, I think that would have been something amazing to see.
Yeah.
But I think for me, Christian's fine, and I agree with what you said. We saw him at the Rumble. He can still wrestle.
Yep.
hopefully he can still go as hard as what he is. Obviously, his new character outwork everyone. Well, we're gonna definitely see whether or not.
Right, you're putting a lot of expectations on yourself if that's going to be the tagline.
Exactly. So, hopefully he can still go. Whether for me, yes, it is a disappointing because again, the criticism is there that AEW is focusing too much on these larger, older stars coming in to help push the division when they have a lot of people like they've got their Jungle Boy, they've got they've got Ricky Starks, they've got all these other people who should be coming out and having these matches, or coming out and being promoted and pushed and made. And this is it's a criticism that I throw out at WWE all the time, and AEW deserve it as well. That sometimes you need to focus on making new big stars to carry your brand going forward. AEW is still a new brand, so yes, they do need some. At this point in their history, they don't need someone like Christian to keep pushing them. Now, I have heard, I haven't confirmed because I haven't listened to it, but apparently, according to a few things I've seen on Twitter, Christian was on Renee's oral
sessions,
oral sessions podcast, and he said in there that John Moxley is the one who wanted him in there because of Christian's mind around wrestling. That he wanted him to depart his knowledge and his experience around the wrestling ring and the intelligence of him to the AEW wrestlers. And look, if that's what he's in there for, fantastic. That AEW will win with that. But advertising him at this level as a active wrestler is not really going to do much for me. I'm hoping that we get to see some good matches. I'm glad that he's going to get a final good run that he wants to have to retire. But when we're looking at it, that's what this is. This is a retirement run for him.
Yes, I agree. And I'm glad that you bring up this criticism that we have to start thinking about for AEW. What is their reliance on the older, aging stars as opposed to building new ones? And I think there's a lot of arguments on both sides, because I think on one hand you're saying they're giving a lot of screen time to some of these older guys, and I'm a little worried about where this might go. On the other hand, you're talking about your champions right now are Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, Darby Allen, and Hikaru Shida. And I mean, Darby Allen is in his 20s, so that's a young champion. Your challenger is Scorpio Sky, who you've also built up. Your challenger to the TNT title, and your challenger to the tag team titles are Rey Fenix and Pac, two guys who have really started kind of a new career, if you will, in AEW since they got there. So there's arguments on both sides to say AEW needs to cool it with the older stars. No, they're doing okay. It's always a fine line when you walk it, but I'm glad that you bring it up, because the last match here that we haven't talked about yet is the street fight, and it was a cinematic match: Sting and Darby Allen versus Brian Cage and Ricky Starks. And I want to skip right to the ending. You can talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about throughout the match. One thing I do want to say aside, the entrances, 5 stars. Those were sick. So great job with that. Great cinematography all around. But the finish, Sting getting the pin on Ricky Starks, I didn't like it. I think that Brian Cage or Ricky Starks should have gone over on Sting. To me, that's the whole point of having Sting in. And I know that the big moment is Darby Allen jumping out of a 10-story building onto Brian Cage. That was the moment of the match. It's what everyone's going to remember. It was awesome. That's what Darby Allen does. This guy is a maniac, and he's a great champion in my opinion, even though he wasn't fighting for the belt on this pay-per-view. But to me, when you got down to those final 2, Ricky Starks and Sting, that was the time to put Starks over right there. That was the time to make Ricky Starks a huge star. And you could have done it. Sting's literal name is the Icon. That's his nickname. You could have had Starks go over right there, and you have just made yourself a big star. But they didn't do it. They had Sting pin, and I get it. Sting, so many people love Sting. He is an icon. But, man, they missed an opportunity to put a younger guy over, in my opinion.
I agree. Not only did he win, but he also kicked out of Stark's finisher, the spear, which is Stark's finisher move. I'm one of those people where that think, finishers need to be protected. We look at the big thing around Kenny Omega's One Winged Angel, it was a massive deal that John Moxley was able to lift up his leg.
Right,
and
even get his
own
leg up.
leg to kick out. Yeah, that was a massive deal. And, if we look at finishers, sometimes, they get kicked out of, and that's fine, as long as the story's there. But for someone who's up and coming, to have their finisher kicked out by someone of Sting's age, is not a good thing.
Now, to be fair, to play devil's advocate, I think Starks' more protected finisher is the Rochambeau. So
yeah, true.
I guess you would say the spear is like a secondary finisher. I agree with you. He still shouldn't have kicked out of it, but
I sometimes forget he has that because on Dark he just spears them and then wins sometimes. Right, so I think I forget that exists sometimes.
He shouldn't have kicked out of the spear. I agree with you.
Look, I think for me, I went into this knowing that Sting and Darby were going to win, because that's, why would you bring Sting in if you were going to have him lose his first match in?
Yeah, that's right.
That's how I was thinking going in, and that's just, I guess, that's what I can see from watching wrestling. That's what normally happens. You get some big person coming in, they're not going to lose in their first match, but it would have been great if he did. So I'm all with you there. I did not want to see Team Taz lose, because I think Team Taz are fantastic, and they should definitely be the ones to take the TNT title off of Darby, because that's, it's been brewing. You've got Hobbs, you've got Cage, you've got Starks in there, and they're three very big protected people.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that stable has a massive future, and I think that having Starks beat Sting would have been amazing for his career.
Yeah.
Maybe not now, obviously his loss, but maybe in a year or two we can come on to a Sting versus Starks one-on-one and give him that opportunity to go over. But yeah, look, it is definitely a missed opportunity, but I can see why they did it, because they wanted to give Sting that, this is a great, also agree with you. The entrance 5-star, the match was obviously a cinematic match. I enjoyed the hell out of it. I felt it was very well done. During the media call, both Tony Khan and Darby both said that he was 90% basically responsible for the entire thing.
Wow.
And Tony Khan said that for him, Darby Allen is a filmmaker first and a wrestler second.
Wow,
so
that is something.
So him and apparently Starks were heavily involved. Darby was basically 90% responsible for it. So, that massive props to Darby for pulling that off. It was well shot. It was well done. I wish they didn't have the commentary. I didn't need the commentary on that one. Yeah. Especially them reacting to it live. It did add occasionally, but it also took away a lot. But yeah, look, at the end of the day, it was a really good cinematic match. Not my favorite. My favorite's still Stadium Stampede, because that was just crazy.
How do you not love Stadium Stampede?
But yeah, look, I've seen a lot of people compare it to the Boneyard match, which obviously had on WWE, and I can see why they're comparing it to that way. Yeah. And I think that comparison makes me just think, we could have had Undertaker versus Sting in a cinematic match, and that's what this shows. But yeah, look, it was a good match. It was much better than I thought it was going to be. Again, I went into this one knowing who was going to win, so I wasn't too excited about it. But, some of the bumps, some of the hits that they took, damn worth it, especially that Hobbs and Cage throwing Darby through that plain glass window.
How cool was that?
And then it smashed, falling down and smashing on his head. I was like, oh my God, that had to hurt.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's just, man, Darby Allen, dude, this is a guy, it's the funny thing. Normally when you have your mid-card title, your secondary title, you expect the champion to be fighting all the time. That's kind of the expectation. But for Darby Allen, and that's what Cody did, but for Darby Allen, it's kind of the opposite. He doesn't fight very much. His style does not allow him to fight very much. He has such a grueling physical style that he can't be in matches the way that Cody was. And normally it wouldn't work. Normally you'd get the kind of Brock Lesnar criticism where you're like, this guy isn't around. He's not fighting. What's the point of this championship? But for Darby, it works. Like, it just works that he doesn't fight for the title all the time. And I really like this match. I really like the way Darby's booked. I didn't love the finish, but like you said, I can understand the thought process. And I don't think that this is a burial of Team Taz or anything like that. But I agree with you. Someone from Team Taz is going to end up taking the belt off of Darby, and they should. I think, personally, I'd put it on Cage, because Cage in that match, I mean, this guy, he looks like a gorilla. Like, what lab did they grow Brian Cage in? This, like, it's unbelievable. So he looked great in that match. He really came off strong. So I'd love to see him be TNT champion. My problem with Team Taz, if you read the AEW Power Rankings, you'll know that I've had this issue with them for a long time. They kind of just do the same thing every week. Like, Sting cut a promo, and then Taz would interrupt, and they would cut a promo, and then eventually they'd be so stupid that they wouldn't realize that Sting is going to show up and attack them, and then they attack Sting, and then Sting attacks them, and really the only bit of originality we got was when Team Taz kidnapped Darby Allen and dragged him behind the car in a body bag, and then Sting kidnapped Hook and then dragged him around in a body bag. That was the most unique we got. I want to see Team Taz flex their storytelling muscles a little bit more. I want to see Starks cut more promos because he's a great talker. So leave Taz to talk for Hobbs and Cage and let Starks talk for himself. I'm thinking maybe split them up. Not dissolve the faction. I mean, have Starks go into a story with someone else, get him in a program somewhere else, and then get Cage, Hobbs, and Taz in a program for the title with Darby Allen, a proper title program with Darby Allen, just with Cage, and go from there. I think these guys are great, but I'm with you. I want to see more things with them. God, we are finally done talking about AEW Revolution. I was not expecting that we would go this long, but you know what? That when you get the support of these statistics that we have on ProWrestlingMusings.com, it's easy to talk a lot about the kind of matches that we are seeing. So final thought on this, I just want to know, letter grade from you, or out of 10, however, how good do you think this show was?
For me, and for this, I've got to include the ending because it was part of the show, botched or not, or whatever, I'll grade it out of 10. For me, overall, if we're including the end, it has to be a 6. Unfortunately, that ending just killed so much for me. If I don't include that ending, or if I grade it after I've slept, my initial response was, okay, this was just a huge letdown, and it just destroyed the entire thing. However, now that I've gone and looked back at it and gone, okay, hey, look, just talking today about it, even just thinking, how great it was. I'd probably say, maybe it was about a 7 or an 8. Probably more a 7. Like I said, there was quite a few matches here that just didn't really hold up. The matches that I enjoyed a lot. But the matches I didn't enjoy just dragged down, and that ending just really killed it. So I'd probably go 7, 7.5 maybe. I'm hoping that Double or Nothing is better, and I think that a lot of fans are also saying that they just want to see them go absolutely crazy with some really good quality matches. But yeah, look, overall we look at the card, we go, okay, Omega and Moxley was a great match.
Yep.
Bucks and Jericho was a good match. Shida and Rio was a good to great match. Hangman Page versus Hardy, not a good match. It was an okay match. Cassidy and that versus Miro and Kip, not a good match. The Battle Royale, good match. So, above average. Probably about a 7, 7.5 for me.
Okay, I can get down with that. I would, in terms of star ratings, again, however much this means to you, the lowest that I gave any match was 2.5, and I think looking back at it, I would have given the Miro and Sabian versus Taylor and Cassidy, I would have given that 2. in the time, that came right after the Women's World Championship match, which I had so much fun watching that I think it kind of like it carried over. So I enjoyed the Sabian and Miro match more, just because I was still thinking about the women's title match that we just saw. So ultimately, yeah, I think that's about 2 stars. And I would give this show, like you said, after sleeping on it and thinking about the ending, I would give it an 8. I think it was a great show. There was a lot on here that I really, really enjoyed. And there was the fact that Stark should have gone over Sting, in my opinion, and obviously the finish to the World Championship match that drag it down. But if that finish doesn't happen, if the pyro goes off the way that it should have in that World Championship match, to me, that's almost a 5-star match, with my only issue being the involvement of the Good Brothers. And we're dealing with one of the best shows of the year. What we got was a good show. It was well above average, but to me, there are some things that they can clean up. They can give a little bit more heat to some of the matches. They can structure it a little better, like you mentioned earlier, that we didn't have kind of 2 downer matches one after another and then followed up with a super long ladder match. That just kind of killed the momentum of the show right in the middle. So I think if you structure it a little better and you add some more heat to some of the matches, like if you're looking at this card at Double or Nothing, but instead of the tag match, instead of Sabian and Miro versus Chuck and Cassidy, it's just Miro versus Orange Cassidy, and they can go out there and have a good singles match, and the big money match, you add a little bit more heat to it. This could have been a great show. So overall, 8 out of 10. You gave it a 7.5, 7. Go watch it if you haven't seen it. It's well worth a watch, in my opinion.
Yeah, look, I agree. I'd probably go 7.5. Definitely an enjoyable show. Lots to enjoy in the show, and yeah, look, I agree. Definitely go give it a watch. Especially the exploding barbed wire death match. It was just something else, and something that I never thought I'd be watching. Yeah, like, you know, on the day I was like, I said to my friends, well, today I'm going to be watching an exploding barbed wire death match, and they're like, you're doing what? And I was like, wrestling, dude, wrestling.
Yeah, exactly. That is the essence of the exploding barbed wire death match. Like, it's just everyone that I was watching with. I told you my dad was there, my sister was hanging out with us, my brother was there, and only me and my dad were really watching the whole match. But when it got to that exploding barbed wire death match, slowly the whole house started to come watch it. Everyone there started to watch it. My dog started watching this barbed wire death match. Like this, it was a spectacle. And even if you don't like the finish, which I didn't, even if it was botched, this match, it's like, I'm happy that in my lifetime I got to watch an exploding barbed wire death match live, and it was as good as it was. I bought a shirt just so I could prove that I watched this thing, that in my lifetime, this really happened on a major company's pay-per-view in the United States. To me, it's crazy. It's great that it's happened, even if the finish didn't go as planned. I think it's just great that the match went down at all. You know what? We were going to talk about New Japan Cup, but I'm thinking we should save it to next week because the tournament's still going to be going on. And neither you nor I are watching it as much as we watch AEW, right? So I'd like to have someone that can lend a lot of expertise to that tournament.
Yeah, personally, I'm looking at the roster, and I can tell you about 4 of the names I know of. I want to know who this Bai is on the tournament. They've got a guy listed as Bai. I really want to know more about him. He sounds very interesting. I wonder if him and Vacant have met.
I think if they did, that would have been the most boring match of all time.
Yep, agreed.
Well, I think next week we'll try to get in someone that can talk a little bit more about the New Japan Cup, which is still going to be going on. For now, though, you can head on over to ProWrestlingMusings.com and you can read our full preview on the New Japan Cup, courtesy of Gareth Ford Elliott. Brilliant writer, and they compiled potential brackets from all of our New Japan experts on Pro Wrestling Musings, and it's very interesting. So go read through that, and hopefully we can get one of them on to discuss that tournament. But for this week, I'm very glad that we were able to talk about Revolution. I'm very surprised that it went as long as it did, but you know what? That is the beauty of wrestling. We can sit here and have fun and talk about it for as long as we want to. So, Anthony, before we sign off, is there anywhere that people can find you?
Twitter, Anthony Down Under is my Twitter handle. I'm also got a couple of articles on pro wrestling musings as well. I contributed to the AEW Revolution preview, and also my very first big feature, which was a look at the month-by-month stats for the entire year of AEW versus NXT versus versus SmackDown versus Raw, and how they do monthly viewer to viewer wise, and that was my very first article. I've got another one up and coming hopefully soon, which is a look at the views versus the views on YouTube and the social media. I guess is social media the way of wrestling viewing of the future?
Yeah, that's interesting. I've actually read your article about taking those TV ratings month by month. I thought it was really interesting. And I'd like to, when we don't have an AEW pay-per-view to discuss, I'd like to get more into that, because I think that's something that's really worth talking about. So I guess that's a little bit of a tease to tell you that this podcast is going to be weekly, at least as much as we can make it so, because there's always stuff in wrestling to talk about. So make sure that you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, subscribe here on YouTube, wherever it is that you are. You can catch us every week talking about wrestling. And hopefully you can learn something from our statistics. And obviously go on over to ProWrestlingMusings.com and you can see everything that we have up. We got power rankings, we have statistical breakdowns, we have charts, everything that us wrestling nerds could possibly want. We have it here on ProWrestlingMusings.com. I am Griff from GA. Go check me out on my YouTube channel, GA Wrestling. We have a lot of fun with wrestling video games over there. And thank you so much for listening to us ramble about AEW Revolution for just under an hour and a half. Thank you so much. Join us next week for more Pro Wrestling Musings. And for now, join us and be nerdy over on ProWrestlingMusings.com.